Here we are. Welcome, everybody. My name is Nick Snap. Welcome. Good afternoon, good evening, whatever it is. This is the Miracles and Atheists community call-in. We're calling it council, but Jason, I like call-in. I think it makes a little bit more sense. So it's still, regardless, known as the MACC. It's a place where we break down misconceptions about following Jesus. We respond to atheist challenges and expose rhetoric. Unlike the podcast, which you all might be familiar with, the MACC is a topical-based, apologetics-focused type of platform. It's a call-in show. It's geared towards people who are genuinely seeking God but have tough questions. It's for truth seekers who are willing to listen to, reasonable answers with an open mind. Joining me here, as always, is my MACC co-host, apologist, evangelist, theologian, Jason Deramo. He's a lifelong student of the Bible, and he's going to bring y'all a more in-depth academic approach to our atheist questions and objections. Does a lot of work on college campuses. He has a platform called forcampus.org, as you can see in his name there. And grateful to have you here again, Jason. How's it going, man?
Going pretty good. You mentioned even it's something I've been just wrestling with, but being a student of the Bible and actually following what the Bible says are two different things. And that's something that is challenging me lately. We can understand and learn truth, but if we're actually applying it to our lives, and I think that's the difference between knowing the word and being obedient and following the word. But other than that, I'm doing good.
That's a good point. Well, for everybody who's hadn't seen it already, the question for today is, if science can explain the origins of the universe, why then do people believe in God or a creation story? As you can see from our banners here, we do have a call-in opportunity. You can call us at 919-301-9045, and you can talk to Jason and I. You can talk about the topic here today, do it live, and challenge us, ask us questions, and we'll have a respectful dialogue. Why not? So what do you think? What did you think last time about our first call-in forum? What was your impression, Jason?
I mean, it was great. I liked the engagement. I even liked the people that, it almost like created a space for other people to, really stretch themselves and really, develop the confidence to be able to present and also to wrestle with some of the things that we're talking about. So yeah, it was great.
Love it. All right, so we're going to probably just unpack a few bullet points here from the topic of the question that we brought up here for about the next 15, 20 minutes, something like that. And then we'll open up the phone lines. And how about we get started, Jason? What you want to open us up with?
Well, a couple things here. And by the way, I probably need to do a better job at this in the future. So I'm going to be reading a commentary from a Bible that I recommend to new believers as well as students. It is called the New Believers Bible. And I'd sent Nick a few links, so I'm sure I'll put that in the show notes later. And then also for students, if you're interested in studying and kind of doing a more exploratory study of the Bible, this is the ESV Student Study Bible. Highly recommend this. It's very portable. There's some good commentary in there as well. So definitely, get those resources and apply the word to your life and just committing to studying and knowledge of God. All right, cool. So I'm going to read this. This is from the conversation, just to highlight here, is, if science can explain the origins of the universe, why then do people believe in God or a creation story? And to really unpack this question, I mean, if you think about it, like science in biblical creation or even theism or any type of origin story are not necessarily mutually exclusive. The idea that those two need to be in totally separate domains was not even a reality of scientists and philosophers for centuries. And this is relatively, I'd say, in the last few centuries that there's been kind of that division between those two fields. And so I think that we can approach these issues of origins and how we came to be from both a scientific and a theological lens without those two having to be divorced from each other. So that's really important. All right. So I'm going to read this. This is starting from the beginning, right? Genesis 1. And this is a commentary I'm reading. By all means, please make sure when you get a chance to read Genesis chapter 1. This is from a pastor. His name is Greg Laurie. He's pretty well known. He's a pretty smart guy. He says, this is in response to Genesis chapter 1. If we can believe Genesis 1:1, Genesis 1, chapter 1, verse 1, and we should, the rest of the Bible will be easy for us to accept. God has always existed. God has no beginning, nor does he have an end. It is worth noting that biblical writers never try to prove the existence of God. We simply read, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. We can't go back any further than that. right? So many so-called experts tell us that the Earth came into being due to an accidental compression of gases and explosions that cooled off and formed a particular planet with special atmospheric conditions just right for life, planet Earth. It just happened that way. It would be ridiculous if I were to suggest to you that an Airbus A380 was built by not a crew of engineers and technicians, but by a tornado sweeping through a junkyard, which created this magnificent aircraft. Similarly, the universe is not here by accident, but by design. In the beginning, God. The Bible doesn't tell us when the beginning was. It just says that God was there to begin it all. So
Right.
a couple other scriptures I'm going to read, and I'm going to read a quote, keep this real short. Isaiah 42:5. This is what God, the Lord, says, the creator of the heavens, who stretches them out, who spreads out the earth with all the springs from it, who gives breath to its people and life to those who walk on it. All right, check this out. This is Job chapter 12, 7 through 10. But ask the animals and they will teach you, or the birds in the sky and they will tell you, or speak to the earth and it will teach you, or let the fish, this is poetic language here, so just, or let the fish in the sea inform you. Which of these do not know that the hand of the Lord has done this? In his hand is the life of every creature and the breath of all mankind. So we see this essence, the breath, right? Well, in that Hebrew language, it's talking about the essence of God, the spirit of God. And something, by the way, just to recap, Genesis 1, right? God said. So God is a speaking God, he's a relational God.
Okay.
And it was so, right? God created mankind in his own image. So we're just the first chapter of Genesis, God speaks. He gives life and breath to all living things. He creates man in his own image, a fully developed man. I mean, maybe not an adult, but a developed man who can think rationally with a conscience, right? The ability for him to create and take dominion over things. He didn't create him as a baby. He created him as a fully grown man. So that the argument over the chicken and egg. Look, we see God creating whole creatures, whole humans, whole processes, right? God saw what he had made, and it was very good. So he creates. Not only does he create in his own image, but he says that it's good. So we have a definition of good because God says it. All right, so check this out.
Okay.
Pretty well-known physicist, or I'd say a scientist. I'll break down his accolades here in a minute, but this is a quote. It says, this is Erwin Schrödinger.
Okay.
He says, I am very astonished that the scientific picture of the real world around me is deficient. It gives a lot of factual information, puts all of our experience in a magnificently consistent order, but it's ghastly silent about all and the sundry that is really near to our heart. He's basically talking about the human heart. So that really matters to us. So it cannot tell us a word about red and blue, bitter and sweet, physical pain and physical delight. It knows nothing of beauty and ugly, good or bad, God and eternity. Science sometimes pretends to answer questions in these domains, but the answers are very often so silly that we're not inclined to take them seriously. Look, this guy's a Nobel-winning Austrian physicist who developed the fundamental results in the field of quantum theory. So I think the idea, and there's so many, what we're talking about, Albert Einstein, we're talking about even leading scientists in the field today in various fields, that they're somehow able to maintain their theistic beliefs or their own presuppositional beliefs about the evidence of God and creation and the meaning and purpose behind that without divorcing their own scientific efforts in the way that they approach issues in the natural. I think that these prizes are not just awarded to anybody. They are awarded to people. I mean, you don't think how many people submit for these. These are millions of dollars. Right. So those boards are, they're secular in nature, but they're looking at, some of the most leading research in these fields. So these people didn't get there by accident. And the other thing is there's another prize that some of these guys wins to advance, whether it's science and religion. I can't remember the name of it though. But some of these guys win these awards, and you think about it, how could they come to these conclusions if they're truly scientists and they have to accept just what's on the natural? To me, it's a non sequitur. But anyway,
who's saying that though? Who's saying it's true?
Well, science? I mean, that's a good point. This is what you hear in the culture that science has said this. Well, that is a blanket truth claim that every single scientist holds to that position, that you cannot accept supernatural, you cannot accept phenomena, you cannot accept a presupposition that there is a God, and somehow not all the time. Oh yeah, and the thing is that I think what people are meaning to say is, from a natural material perspective, science has to divorce any type of supernatural or phenomenon. And that's not true. Science makes faith-based claims all the time. And
or
it
else
relies
it's intellectual suicide is what
right. And so I think that that's an important distinction. Okay.
it's good.
Couple things. And if you want, we could break here. I got like a couple more things here. We can go into it. But basically,
Might as well
when just a few more minutes here. When we're talking about any type of truth claim or any type of question, especially one like this, I think it's important that we have the same language. Okay. And this is more important, I think, maybe in a debate or a discussion context with people from different worldviews. But essentially, this is Oxford Dictionary, right? So if I'm using the term etymology, which is the origin of a word and its historical development, it's at the core, the language that we're using.
Okay.
We're talking about things that have, like, at its most base level, the words and language we're using, I'm going to try to keep as neutral as possible. So I'm not going to borrow language from a biblical sense. This is just Oxford, right? This is the
you don't want Christianese,
right? I don't want to put a worldview or presupposition onto language I'm using. Okay. Good. Consciousness. Okay. Some people in different beliefs do not hold that this is a reality. This is a true, tangible thing. Okay. I'm going to borrow this definition. I think is the most balanced. The state of being able to use your senses and mental powers to understand what is happening. So right now what I'm introducing is language that is, I'm attempting to just draw this very neutral position when we're using this language. Okay. Evolution. There's a couple one I like, the gradual development of plants and animals over many years to adapt to changes in the environment. I like that one. I like this one better. Keeps it simple. The slow, steady development of something. Okay. So we're just using the basic, most fundamental definitions for this.
Defining our terms is important.
Right. So design, okay, there's a few here, like, general arrangement of different parts, drawing plan.
That's good.
I like this one, a plan or an intention, like the airplane. If it just showed up out of nowhere and it was a part of some random process, DNA, you see structure and logic behind it, proteins, all these things, right? Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Now here's one, creation. Okay, this is where it starts getting a little interesting here. Now I would like to use this definition. Making of the world, especially by God, is described in the Bible, but we're not going to use that one. But that is a definition from one vantage point. Okay, I like this one. This one I think is fair. The act or process of making something that is new, or of causing something to exist that did not exist before. And so, look here, you cannot create life from non-life. You cannot create material things from immaterial things. We just don't see that anywhere. Right. And so we're going to unpack this more, but I want to rephrase that again. So using the Oxford Dictionary term right here for creation, the act or process of making something that is new, or of causing something to exist that did not exist before, like the universe, because we just can't see anywhere else where something came from nothing.
Yeah. Is it appropriate to define nothing?
Hey, look, if you want to pull it up real quick, I'm going to read it one more and then go into my 3 basic premises, and then we'll take you can define that as well. The absence of something.
I guess so, yeah.
Okay, so look, here's 3 basic premises. This is what a few things that I bring up. These are mine. These are not, exhaustive, but these are going to, I think, kind of color the rest of the conversation that we're going to have. So one basic premise is, in the context of this question, science cannot answer questions involving the realm of metaphysics, things outside of nature, i.e. meaning, man's meaning, purpose, morality, his origin. Science can't. Now, science can make inferences, but science does not typically delve into the area of metaphysics because it can't measure it. It can't put it on a electrode spectrometer and figure out all the there's certain aspects of life in creation that they're phenomena. There's things that aren't reproducible in a lab environment. So science is best able to stick within the realm of areas it can measure. And here's the thing. There's many different perspectives in that. Science can look at long developed processes and make inferences as well. It took thousands or millions of years or billions of years, but that is also perspective. And there's also many different ways you can measure things. So we'll talk about that in a little bit. All right. Premise 2. In no place do we, and I mentioned this earlier, in no place do we ever find non-created things begetting created things, basically producing created things. Life creates life. Non-life cannot create life. We do not see non-material things creating material things anywhere. Now, it may look that way from the human perspective, when you dig into it and you apply the right science and you get down to the molecular level, you just don't see it anywhere. You don't see something just coming out of blue spontaneously without any purpose or reason behind it. All right, cool. Now, what people may say is, well, we haven't figured that out yet. We haven't discovered that yet. We can theorize, but that's still not a truth claim. There's still not a consistent answer that we can. Okay, so check this out. Third premise: human beings as a conscious species. Now, I know some people right there. Okay, you want to replace conscience with self-aware or self-actualized, or a fully present, fully capable human being that can use higher reasoning. Okay, cool. Human beings as a conscious species have an acute awareness that there are phenomena and other occurrences in nature that are not explained by mere logic and reason. So I want to just that last piece, that we are acutely aware that there are things in this world that we cannot explain using our brains. And I'll give you an example: love, dreams, matter, gravity. We can look at these things and we can make inferences as to what they are, but we cannot use our logical reason to fully understand how those things came to be and why they're even there to begin with. It doesn't make any sense from an evolved creature from primordial dust to have dreams. It doesn't make any sense.
I'm tracking.
Okay, cool. Or to even show empathy or love. Now, some people would say that's a whole different discussion, but look, really, why does morality exist? How does that factor in if we're all a bunch of random, space particles that came out of some kind of spontaneous, evolutionary development and progression? It doesn't make any sense for us to be able to show those. So that's all I have for now.
Okay. Well, the definition of nothing, because I brought it up, was no thing, not anything, not no part, share, or trace, since we're defining terms. No, I appreciate that. There's, opening that up. And like I said, everybody who's just joining in, we're going to open the phone lines in about, I'd say about 5 minutes. I think I said 10 minutes, like 10 minutes ago. So give me like another 5 minutes. I want to just kind of open up my thoughts. And God, I just want to caveat this with this is like a linchpin, right? This conversation about evolution, and it gets a lot of folks really, really heated and sarcastic. And I've just seen some really bad conversations about this on my own platform as well. So I just, guys, we're adults, right? Let's just have adult conversations and just seek to understand both sides, right? Let's just talk about it, and hopefully we're mature enough to do this without just ridiculous mocking. It is what it is. But all right, so when I think about evolution, and gosh, I'm absolutely not qualified to have this conversation, but I'm gonna have it anyway, because why wouldn't we? If we really want to understand what's going on in life, why wouldn't we have the conversation? So the Darwinian theory of evolution, it's been like the standard according to mainstream scientific sources like PBS, for example. It's stood the test of time. So if that's the case, I just want to put a statement out there that was actually signed, and many of you, Wes, maybe you've heard about this. There's more than 1,100 scientists, researchers, all in chemistry, biology, medicine, physics, geology, anthropology, paleontology, and statistics, which is important as well. They all signed this statement of like a disagreement with Darwinism. And here's the statement. It says, "We are skeptical of the claims for the ability of random mutation and natural selection to account for the complexity of life. Careful examination of the evidence for Darwinian theory should be encouraged." So it's interesting they said we're skeptical, because a lot of the atheists that we talk to, they call themselves skeptics as well. Now, a skeptic isn't exactly an atheist. It's just skepticism can be a healthy thing, right? Have a healthy amount of skepticism about the things that come across your plate. I mean, let's look at mainstream media and the things going on in society right now. We should have a very healthy skepticism, everything that we're seeing right now. So that's all this statement really says. And there's some like significant scientists that have signed this thing. One of those guys, his name is James Tour. He's a synthetic organic chemist, and he's provided some really strong evidence I've seen in the contrary to Darwinian theory. And I'm just going to kind of recite one of the quotes that he said. He's a professor of nanoengineering, and this guy actually builds molecules. And I bring up molecules because that's really what's involved when it comes to DNA. So the information, this is from James Tour and his site, the coding within the DNA or RNA. I know there's a lot of talk about RNA nowadays with the shot and everything. It corresponds to the sequence of the nucleic acids, and it's really the primary to the discussion of life overall. So the requisite molecules for DNA, which are lipids, proteins, nucleic acids, and carbohydrates, he says, Dr. Torr says, they're so unlikely to have occurred in the states and quantities needed for life that we could never have gotten to the point of figuring out the genesis of the requisite code or information, talking about DNA, right? So he says, even if one of us were given all the molecules needed, which is a thing right there, right? Even if we're given all the molecules, first of all, where the molecules come from, but just granted, okay, you're given all the molecules. If they're needed to complete the stereochemical purity or the information code or DNA, called DNA, if we were given those, could a cell be constructed using the chemical and biochemical tools that we have available with a laboratory in a controlled environment, all these things? So Torr's written about this hypothetical experiment. Could you create this? He's written, and he says it's impossible using today's expertise to even construct the lipid bilayer. That's namely the exterior packaging that holds the cell's nanomachinery in place. Just the lipid bilayer, which itself surrounds thousands of nanosystems, is beyond our ability to synthesize. The conclusion is that the thought experiment is that basically life based on amino acids, nucleotides, saccharides, and lipids is an anomaly. Life should not exist anywhere in our universe. If you have this environment, if you have everything available to create life, it should not exist because it's so complex. Yet we're led to believe that 3.8 billion years ago, the requisite compound should be found in some undersea vent or a cave or however these compounds came about. So somehow they've assembled themselves into the first cell, which is a really, really complex thing. So the central idea of biological evolution is that all life on Earth shares a common ancestor. So we're moving into the creation of life, which is what we're just explaining. That's like one of the things that to me is the strongest anti-argument for the case of spontaneous generation of life. The other case is, well, what's the evidence surrounded about biological evolution? So the evidence that we all share a common ancestor. So here's some of the evidence that's, and please I'm seeing some comments come through. Put your what is the science for you when it comes to the common ancestor? And again, I'm not going to claim to be an expert by any means. I'm just giving information that maybe some people haven't heard. Maybe you have. So one of them is the similarities between certain anatomical features, embryos and molecular mechanisms. There's similarities in these things. So my question would be then, how do similarities definitely indicate a common ancestors? Yes, we're both theists, Otangelo.
But hey, if anyone wants to contribute to the conversation, feel free to call in.
Yeah. I guess
open to hearing. So
we're about I'm gonna go ahead and open the phone. That's a good break here.
I believe at some point we're going to have people from different worldviews on here as well. So
yeah, absolutely.
Get this thing kicked off.
So let me go ahead and do that while we get the call.
If it's okay with you, Nick. Were you done with your argument?
No, but go ahead while I'm getting the call in set up here.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, because I think that's important. I think you're mentioning, relevant science by people in this field that are experts, right? So I don't presume to be an expert. I don't want to put out that I have some kind of expert knowledge in the realm of science and biology and all these fields. Right. However, there are people, Dr. Stephen Myers, Cambridge physicist, things like double PhDs and biology and theology and apologetics, something. And these are people that are brilliant in their field, leading in their field, and they hold to a creationist view. They hold to a theistic view. So I think you're going to find individuals
and call screener lines
that are
really show or meeting number and press pound.
That are really intelligent, that can articulate the science better than maybe Nick and I can. But what I'm doing as a biblical, or I say as a Christian, as a theist who is a follower of Christ, I'm just going to present to you what I believe is the strongest evidence for the existence of God. And I'm going to be using this based on the biblical.
Jason, give me 1 second here.
The biblical example, real quick, as well as just evidence that's available to all people.
Welcome, host. You are now in the host room, and
I gotta figure out a way to do this when I'm not live.
No, it's okay.
Audio
Um,
recording is on.
Okay,
Roll
so
channel.
the lines are open. Sorry about
Cool.
that, guys.
So one of the things when we're talking about evidence, or we're talking about different truth claims, we have to factor in worldview. So we mentioned language. So we got down the language first. Now we're going to talk about and unpack worldview, because if I'm approaching issues of origin, meaning, morality, and destiny, that's going to be filtered through the lens of my worldview. If I believe that there is no God, everything that's going in my world is going to inform that belief, right? Okay. So this is a well-known apologist. His name is Ravi Zacharias. Some people don't like him because of his own moral failings. You know what? I'm not going to talk about individuals' character. The reality is that we all struggle. We all have sin. We all have moral failings. I personally need to, I'm going to actually do this on air. I'm going to recant a statement I made a few episodes back about atheism being a religion. I have since learned other things, and I think that was a mischaracterization of the atheists and some of their beliefs. So you know what? I'm not perfect, but I'm going to read this because it's brilliant.
Okay.
So this is Ravi Zacharias says, whether religious or irreligious, everyone has a worldview. A worldview basically offers answers regarding origin, meaning, morality, and destiny. That's fundamental to every human being.
Right.
In our very human longing for answers to such matters, we share common ground with each other. That's why we can coexist together. A sound worldview must answer individual questions in correspondence to reality, and the sum of all the answers must be coherent. So you can't just say, well, you know, I can't make sense of the origin, but I know that I'm here for a purpose. No, your worldview has to be consistent and coherent with everything. We talked about this in previous episodes. What are the 3 tests for truth? You got to have logical consistency, empirical adequacy, and it's got to be experientially relevant. You have to have a personal experiential encounter with this truth. So if it's non-belief, you got to be able to substantiate that. You can't just default ignorance, because that's not a truth. That's a truth claim that has to be substantiated by evidence, not lack thereof. It has to actually be affirmed by valid evidence. So you can't claim ignorance on this. All right. Now, here's the thing is, we are not claiming that we have 100% Cartesian certainty that God exists, but we are claiming that the preponderance of evidence points to a creator God. And I could show you, based on historical findings, that the Bible, the person, the life, death, and resurrection of Jesus, has more historical evidence than anything that we know about. So if we're going to put that up against any other truth claim, then we have to examine its tenets and the evidence behind it. All right, cool. So you have atheism, or theism is only one of many worldviews. You have animism, you have naturalism, you even have atheism, and agnosticism and secularism. So not all atheists hold to the same worldviews.
Yeah.
You have some, you know.
One of the comments I saw in one of the broadcasts is that there was a fence that we even called atheism a worldview. I thought that was kind of interesting. What do you want to call it? If it's not a worldview. I know people don't want to call it a belief. I get that, but why
okay, well, let's just say this is. I'll read this. How about this? I'll just read this and we'll unpack that. Okay, so it's atheism historically refused to believe in the pantheon of gods. I just actually heard this book review. Plato had written a series of letters about.
You can call in anytime the phone lines are open, and we are going to get back to the evolutionary discussion here. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think Plato had written about Socrates, and Socrates actually, it's funny, he brought up a lot of these same issues during his time, and he was tried and executed for this. He took the poison, but he was bringing up the same issues in his time, going to some of the leading intellectuals and philosophers and scientists and people in their time, and he being an atheist, or being someone, or I wouldn't say an atheist, but not obviously believing in any particular God, but I think he was still maybe in the worldview. Okay, so let's just take out the worldview argument. Modern expressions are born out of scientific developments in 17th and 18th century. So we're talking about the evolution of atheism, right? Evolution, get it?
Right.
So as a critic of the literal understanding of the Bible as prescribed by Catholic and Protestant tradition, so a lot of this was a response to some of the intellectual and theological and political structures of their time. This what bore the Enlightenment, which became the new faith with science, reason, and rationality, becoming the instruments of its exercise, not evil practice, but missing, flawed when set apart from faith. So basically, in a nutshell, atheism kind of emerged as a response to the political, the religious, even some of the scientific arguments of the time. And I think a better term would have been skepticism. Because I don't think like strong atheism.
That's a good point.
Strong atheism in a time where the majority of people were immersed in a worldview that God was involved in some way or shape or form. Even some of the philosophers, like we mentioned, Jean-Jacques Rousseau, We had mentioned Sartre. We mentioned a lot of these guys who had in their worldview, and they may have been struggling with it, but at least they acknowledged the existence of a God, or they acknowledged. It wasn't until like the nihilists in like Nietzsche and all these other guys, and
Right.
I would say probably more like later, that's when they really took it to the next level. So yeah, you've had people throughout history that have not believed in God or gods, but the overwhelming majority of people that lived, even the leading philosophers and scientists at their time, held to a worldview that a God existed, and that the creation as they knew it came from an intelligent creator or a God, or even a pantheon of gods. So in their worldview, they acknowledged existence, that life didn't beget from non-life. What we're dealing with today is people actually believing that this all came out of some random process. And that is just not logical based on what we see.
So let's talk about, it's a good segue. I want to kind of talk a little bit more
Okay.
about the evidence of the common ancestor that I'd started going through a little bit. But the first one that I brought up was one of the main evidences. Okay, there's just similarities between the certain anatomical features. There's similarities with embryos and molecular mechanisms. But I would just say, like, well, okay, how does a similarity between two different species indicate a common ancestor? I mean, does it make sense to say if all species share similar structures and mechanisms, they must be evolved from a common ancestor? Does that even make sense to say that? They could be evolved from a common ancestor, but to say they must be evolved from a common ancestor doesn't seem to.
You don't even have to. This is what's cool. Here, break that down even smaller. You don't even have to look at the species, because there are, like, you look at, there's distinctions between human beings and the animals, and we see this in the creation account. God creates the animals, there's an order, then he creates human beings. Check this out. Origin, right? If we're talking about origin, is from the evolutionary theory perspective, it's a blind evolutionary process that's responsible. Mutations, right? And here's the thing: is it's a faith. Like you're trusting that is true. Darwin was going on faith that this was true, and he was finding evidence, right? Because if we start with the worldview, with a presupposition that there is no God, and your evidence is going to try to substantiate that. Now, here's the thing: is Darwin has since his theories have been put on the microscope since, and a number of scientists, atheists and theists, have said, hey, some of the claims that he made, we have discovered. This is before DNA was discovered. This is before some of the advanced science that we have today was discovered. And there are tons of issues with his claims.
Well, that's what I talked about earlier.
Right.
1,100 scientists and researchers have
evolutionary, Darwinian evolutionary theory is not a discussion. It's not. So we need to move past that, and we need to find, if you're not going to hold to a creationist view, and you're not going to hold to these views, then you need to come up with something more substantial in an entirely different realm than Darwinian evolution theory. And you cannot borrow from a theistic worldview. You cannot borrow biblical language. You have to come up with something completely new to substantiate that. I think honestly, the one that's come out recently is the ancient alien or ancient astronaut theory that or is it? There's another theory, and I wanted to mention this in the previous episode. It's called it's like got it in here somewhere.
Well, here,
keep going. I'm gonna look for this.
You talked about mutations, so maybe kind of.
Oh, but check this out.
It's interesting though. It's an interesting thing about the mutations. So I guess why DNA mutations do exist. So the question is, what can and cannot be achieved by a DNA mutation? So a lot of skeptics will cite like the eyeless Mexican tetrafish, and they'll talk about antibiotic resistant bacteria.
Yeah, I got this.
They'll talk about those things due to DNA mutations. But at the end of that, and I want to go a little bit more into this, Jason. So give me like 2 minutes.
No, you're good.
A fish is still a fish, and a bacterium is still a bacterium. So mutation, the probability of mutation, if you look at how this has worked, and it's based on size of the population of the thing that's mutating. So I'll give you an example. We talked about bacterium. The population of the deadly parasite that causes malaria, it actually has a 1 in 10 to the 20th power chance to make a double point mutation, which is what would be needed to cause an amino acid change that would be required to resist the malaria treatments, right? So when you have a 10 to the 20th power chance to make this mutation out of all the populations, and you still see the mutation. It's like, wait, we're saying, well, this is evidence for evolution. So the thing about it is that this parasite, there's 10 to the 20th power parasites that are born every single year, right? So there's a better chance that a mutation is going to occur if you have that number of parasites occurring and being born every single year. The population is massive, right? But if you compare this to primates, and if you do believe the Earth is billions of years old, then the number of primates over the past 10 million years is 0.000001% of that of the parasite. And so the means for humans to achieve mutation, we would need to wait 100 million times 10 million years, 100 million times 10 million years, which is many times the age of the universe, according to secular science. So I think it's really interesting as far as what does it take to have these mutations, and how do you compare that to humans? And now that would have to be basically done for every species that's here on the Earth.
But by the way, it's not just the bacteria, the eye,
Mhm.
You have irreducible complexity. So you have in whales, you have certain components of them that if you like, sperm whales or blue whales, where if you remove one component of their internal organ structure, the entire thing just doesn't work. Like it won't function as as human beings. If we don't have certain proteins in our DNA, we're not going to be able to be walking and talking. That's how delicately complicated all this is. It's not like, even if it were to evolve, you're talking, it's not billions of years. You're talking about the probability of it even happening isn't like, it's incalculable. That's how random and somehow it's all held together. Oh, by the way, this is what I was going to mention. It's called a panspermia.
Okay.
Hear me out. So so this is like kind of the ancient alien theory kind of borrowed some of this, but it's life on Earth came from an advanced alien race by some form of intelligent design. I think Richard Dawkins defaulted to this recently, but this was Crick and Hoyle had mentioned this was spores from another planet. If you've seen the movie Prometheus, they kind of played with this concept as well. But I mean, look, this is the best argument that some of these leading atheists are coming up with, because they can't substantiate Darwinian evolutionary theory and some of these other claims. So they're going to default to some form of intelligent design argument. They're just not going to call it biblical creator God or Jesus Christ. They're not going to submit and humble themselves to a personal God that has the ability to create, determine the boundaries of not only yours and my life, Nick, but everybody else listening to this. So you don't get to do what you want to do without a consequence.
Well, so I want to ask the atheists that are watching, if you have moved past Darwinianism, as Jason alludes to, because I've seen that in the past. Say, hey, we're past Darwin. Darwin just got us kicked off and started. We're much further past that. You don't know anything about evolution. So I'd like to kind of understand what that looks like from the atheist worldview. If you have that, what does it look like to move past Darwin? Where are you at now?
If anyone wants to get on the call, just check in.
Yeah. No calls yet.
Yeah, we had a lot of activity last time, but
we did. But this is this evolution thing, this linchpin conversation. There's probably a lot of folks that
so look. Here's something that I made a note of. Proponents of evolutionary theory will say those are all mutations and could be easily compared to any other organism that we have that seem to have adapted. And then someone mentioned the human chromosome number 2. I looked at some of that. Okay. I think it's a stretch, because here's the thing. Let's talk about back to the origin. So that might be an attempt to explain the process by which we came here, but you're talking about the probability that, I mean, you got it. If you're going to implement the statistics and the math here, with the conditions of the Earth and the sun, I mean, life. Now, here's the thing: is there could have been life here, but the point at which man is capable of understanding these things is what we're talking about, the conscious mind. And here's the thing is, it doesn't make sense for us to have these faculties if it came by a random chance. And I think that is, if we don't see any other planet in the known universe that has human beings, we don't see the conditions that we have to support life anywhere else. Now we see, people have making arguments that Mars may have at one point, but the thing is, you don't see it. And I would argue a stronger case would be is if it did occur, if it was out there, with the technology and the way that we've evolved today, how do we even understand that? I mean, that's what blows me away. The fact that we're able to even understand that that we are possibly created, that for that to even take place in an evolution sense. I mean, you're going to talk about if it took all the random possibilities and probabilities for us to even be alive, we'll tack on another billions and billions and billions of years for us to even figure out that we have the higher faculties to know what that means. To me, that is not visible anywhere else in our known world or universe. We just don't see that level of complexity anywhere else. We don't see non-life begetting life. That seems very trivial maybe to some, but that in a nutshell, that's what we're talking about.
Life is all based on molecules, as we had talked about earlier. Just the molecules and the probability of the mutation, and just the probability of one having all the right molecules in the right space and the right time and the right quantity. Even if you had that, how difficult it would be to create life from that. Otangelo says molecules always disintegrate. They never complexity on their own. I'm not sure what that the second part, but if they always disintegrate, that's kind of, if molecules are always disintegrating and breaking down, then how?
But here's the thing: is cells die, but they also regenerate, right? So we do see a process.
But think about that though. If you have a lab notebook and you're writing down your process as a scientist in a controlled environment, you have the right molecules, you're figuring this out, and there's people that build molecules for a living, so they know how to do this. Then you get the right formula together. Well, your molecules are disintegrating constantly. Like your notebook constantly gets scratched out and started over and over and over again. So it seems to me like the more time you have, the billions of years you have, the problem will just get worse because you just keep on having to start over and over and over again. Go ahead.
No, I'm gonna say this, and I think it may come off to some as pretty controversial, but this is to the atheist friends. So there's other people with different worldviews, but to the atheists, it is exhausting to hold that position. It's got to be exhausting because it is one of the most difficult defensible positions. I would argue you are better off moving into a naturalist position in terms of your worldview and stance, because at least you're acknowledging that there are causes. Now, if that doesn't settle you on a God, I don't know what to tell you, but I think you give yourself so much more freedom to move out of the possibility that there is no God, because that is so difficult. Even if you could substantiate that, you're going to run into so many issues. The fact that you have other moral beings walking around that you're going to have to interact with on a daily basis that are going to fundamentally challenge you. It's like, and let me sum this up. So naturalism, and this is why I want to mention this.
Well, I just want to define terms again too, because I've done.
Yeah, that's what I was going to do.
The atheist, the modern, the atheist now, the definition you just described is not really accurate in their minds. At least they'll say atheist means lack of belief in a God versus there is no God. So there's a difference there that just need to recognize. It seems like it's a lot easier of an out to me.
The skeptic would say, I need evidence. The atheist just strongly asserts there is no God. Evidence or not, there's a level of ignorance that is self-imposed. Now, a skeptic might hold to an atheist position until they discover, but now you're not holding to atheism. You're now moving into the realm of phenomena, in the realm of faith. And so there's a point at which we have to call it what it is. If you truly believe there is no God, and we all came from stardust, and we all have no meaning or purpose, and there is no conscience, you need to substantiate that. And it has to be logically consistent, empirically adequate, and experiential relevant. Well, you don't believe in experience. So, we're all just here for no reason. There is no ultimate reality or purpose to our meaning. How did we get here? Doesn't matter. Sorry. I don't need to prove it. To me, that's escapist. You're escaping the reality that there is a creation and that we're responsible to live morally and upright, which means that we need to establish a standard at which we are going to hold to that is acceptable for the rest of society. Right. And that's the thing, is you can do that because you're borrowing from another worldview, a theistic worldview, or a worldview that encompasses those moral presuppositions. So to me, it's a matter of language and a matter of logic and applying those things in the context of the rest of humanity.
Right. That's not an evolutionary argument, though.
It's not. I mean, from a scientific perspective, though, give me the evidence from a scientific perspective that God doesn't exist. because I have all the evidence in the world that points to a God does exist.
Well,
And it's strong.
Wes made the comment here, and I'm not sure if he's still on or not, but he says it still would not default that your God, Wes always says God and lower G, or we were created is even true. So I guess that my question with Wes would be then, okay, well, what is it then?
Point to me the most
What's
substantiated evidence to back that claim. I want to talk about evidence. Show me the evidence that proves that is not true, because I have a whole mountain of evidence that proves that God exists.
And I guess the alternative to everything being created from nothing, I guess, would be that everything was already here. And I struggle with that. I got to investigate that a little bit more, but I struggle with that from an entropy perspective as the tendency of things to break down. And we're talking about already on the chat that molecules always disintegrate. Can I bring it back to one of the other pieces of evidence when it comes to, because since nobody's calling in, which is so unfortunate, you can, anybody watching right now, please feel free to call in. We're not going to.
Well, here's the thing. If you don't call in and you don't bring these up, then what you're going to hear is us talking about our arguments. And so if we want to have an open discussion, you have an opportunity to present, so it's not like we're trying to just say this and mock. We want to encourage conversation, because some of these conversation points I might have not the whole perspective or definition of some of these things. So help me to clarify these positions. How about that?
We're all willing to learn for sure. So, but kind of going back to, we covered a lot of this. How do you create life given the molecules and what's really composed of life? Then the overall central idea of biological evolution. Again, I'll reiterate for those who weren't watching earlier, it's that all life on Earth shares a common ancestor. So what's the evidence that we have come from a common ancestor?
Well, not even the common ancestor. Well, this ties into it, I guess. But from the scientific perspective, you have a couple different arguments here, right? So from the teleological argument, which is, I'll sum this up. It's the argument in an attempt to prove the existence of God that begins with the observation of the purposelessness of nature. In the summary, you have the Big Bang, right? So the teleological argument moves to a conclusion that there must exist a designer, a cause, right? So you have the Big Bang, you have fine tuning, and you have evolution. Now, here's the thing with evolution. Not all evolution is not a blanket term. There's many different forms of evolution that we're talking about, from a biological standpoint to the not adaptation. I'm trying to think of the other one that you mentioned.
Darwinian.
That's a perspective of evolution. So we see evolution.
That is the common ancestor.
Right. We see processes, slow moving processes, but we don't see a plant turning into a human. We don't see an entirely different category of a process, a single cell turning into a complicated multi-cell organism.
Right.
And we don't see that today.
That's the mutation argument that we kind of talked about earlier.
An argument would be, well, we see a piece of bacteria that does, that makes some kind of, change. But to pair that up with a human being, to pair that up with the Earth, in the solar system and all of its complications, I think that's a stretch, because we're talking about something that we use our faculties to measure, not something completely separate from us that's being measured against us. That sounds kind of, but and that's why I think people delve into the whole alien discussion, and that maybe we're created by an intelligent life. Okay, but now we're dipping into theism. So you have a cosmological argument. It's the argument for the existence of God, which claims that all things in nature depend on something else for their existence. There's a contingent. The whole cosmos must therefore itself depend on a being which exists independently or necessarily. So intelligent design, universal consciousness, right? So, but here's the thing: is these are not biblical in a line. These are not just biblical. These are people that don't even have a worldview, whether it's centered in the scriptures or theism, can hold to these. Now, here's the thing: is the atheist has to also present their evidence, or the naturalist has to present their evidence. Then we move into the human origins argument. Nick, you want to respond?
Yeah, well, we have a call.
Okay, let's go. Take it.
Let's do it. Nick Villarreal from Jackson, Michigan. Can you hear me?
Yeah, hear you.
How you doing, Nick?
Very blessed. How yourself?
Oh, the same. Thanks for calling, man. So
definitely,
we're talking about evolution in science, and just grateful to have a caller. Thanks for doing that, man. That's what this is all about, just to kind of kick around some ideas and thoughts. What'd you have on your mind, man?
So I guess a question that came to my mind: do you guys think it takes more faith to believe in evolution, or the intelligent design of the Lord?
You touched on it a little bit, Jason, already, right? I mean, as far as that, if you just look at the evidence, like atheists are always talking about, and skeptics are talking about, what's the evidence, the scientific, empirical data that supports God.
I think that. So here's what I'd say is, because I have a personal relationship with Jesus, and because I have been given the grace gift of the Holy Spirit, I have the privilege of being able to view things from, I think, the best lens. I think apart from that personal relationship and understanding of God as a relational being, the best argument I think you're going to fall on is maybe.
On mute?
No, you can hear me. You should be able to hear me. Can you hear me?
You can't hear?
No, I'm hearing silent.
Okay, well, I'm saying for people that, for the rest of viewers, and maybe
I
you
don't
can
hear anything. You asked Jason the question, and all I heard was
Okay.
Well, I'll just say this for the rest of the viewers that maybe you can watch this, Nick. You could probably review this later on the live stream. But I think intelligent design is what you would default to if you didn't have that personal revelation of God, his existence through a relationship with his son. And so I think that if you don't believe that there is a design or a contingent or some kind of agent in the creation, you're going to default to potentially an evolutionary theory argument, or that it was a giant cosmic accident that we just came here from nothing, which is illogical, because nothing can beget something. That we don't see that anywhere else.
Well, Nick, you can hear me, but not Jason. Is that correct? I wonder if that's something with the way that we're set up here.
We have another troll here, this Karadius hand.
Yeah, I only heard you. I didn't hear anything that Jason was talking about.
That is disappointing. Okay, well, we'll have to figure that one out. But Nick, thanks for calling, man.
Yeah, man.
Appreciate it.
Hopefully that doesn't happen again.
Yes, sir. My pleasure.
Bye.
All right. We'll see it.
That's kind of weird.
Yeah.
Just never really know what to expect.
It's so crazy when we don't have our dying son on here. It's like we're these
where is our
we're Stray Cat? We're Stray Cat? Where's all these other people that? Yeah.
Oh man. Well, okay. So I did want to talk a little bit about some of the the evidence again, Jason.
Sure.
Just kind of going through the trail. I want to talk about one of the crucial pieces of what they say evidence is for us being generated from a single common ancestor is the fossil record. And so widely considered to be crucial proof of the correctness of the theory of human evolution. And so there's a bunch of like case in point missing links that are typically referred to. There's Lucy. I'm sure everybody's heard of Lucy in East Africa. There's Java man in Indonesia. And then there's Peking or Beijing man that's out of China. And so the first one, Lucy, if you really dig into the thing about Lucy, which is probably the strongest missing link that people come up with, is that it's been really documented. I went back to a 1983 New York Times article that provides just all the details about the scientist arguments questioning whether she even had the ability to walk upright, which is the main thing with Lucy, is that she had the ability to walk upright, but she had a chimpanzee type of skull or brain. And so there's not even, there's a tremendous controversy. Oh, it's not like a cut and dry type of thigh with Lucy. Java man, which I thought was really interesting. Java man, really what they found with him was only a skull cap, a tooth, and a thigh bone. And scientists aren't even in agreement that the thigh bone had any relationship with the skull cap and the tooth. And then the thing about the Peking Beijing man that, I mean, my red flags go up when I see anything Rockefeller Foundation, but it was excavated in the 1920s and funded by the Rockefeller Foundation. And Peking man was announced as a human ancestor after only 3 teeth were found. And these are still like the modern day
Why do we only see this in the last century, though? The last century or two? How come we don't see records in antiquity of people finding crossbred human ape? Like, I mean, you don't see records of that anywhere in history. You know what I mean? Like, it's to me, and it's the same thing. Like, you hear the ancient aliens theories, you hear all these other things, you know, but it's anybody that has any real archaeological, historical, pedagogical, you know, credentials just breaks the stuff down. Like, it's like the Da Vinci Code, man. Like, I mean, anybody like that really just does the work realizes these guys are standing on nothing. It's pop culture. It's funny. These guys aren't real PhD, you know, doctorate level professors, you know, going into this from the standpoint of evidence or going into the standpoint of historical record. And that's why I think these leading atheist skeptics are still, they really wrestle over the existence of Jesus because they know they can't deny it. The evidence is too strong. Yeah. And what they'll do is they'll say, well, yeah, he existed, but, you know, he didn't do all these miracles. And I'm like, dude, like, where's your evidence for that? You got historians during that time that weren't even believers that were recording. You had Pontius Pilate. You had Joseph Flavius Josephus. You had we mentioned the other the emperor at the time, who
we talking last broadcast
a couple episodes ago. Yeah. But like you had letters being passed back and forth between Pilate and I'm trying to remember the guy who was the Roman emperor during the time after Jesus was crucified, and they were concerned about the growing Christian sect in the area. I think his name was Trajan. I think his name was.
I don't know, man.
That was 112. But I mean, look, you have records of these guys talking about the existence of Christians. You have letters. I believe the bishop of Antioch, one of the early church fathers, was writing about the Gospels in and around the time of not the 20, 30 years, 40 years, maybe after the death of Jesus Christ. I mean, so these are real legitimate historical records, and I don't see skeptics presenting evidence that proves otherwise.
Otangelo, I don't know if you know him. He said he just sent you a friend request, Jason, but he says he has a lot of creation science stuff that he can share on his timeline.
I appreciate that. I'm probably, if I'm just being honest, I don't accept friend requests from people I don't know personally, and it's nothing against you, man. But I might just say, for the sake of this context, maybe we can,
either way,
shoot an email to 4campus.org, go to the website and shoot me an email. How about that? And we'll talk.
Well, we appreciate that. I don't know, Tangelo, what your worldview is. Love to hear from you and call in. Why not? I'd love for you to call in if you have the opportunity.
But yeah, I mean, dude, it's if we met on the street and we talked for a little bit, and I feel you out, or just want to be intentional about that. But yeah, check out the ministry. There's probably answers to your questions on the website. Go to 4campus.org. Shameless plug.
Well, it sounds like he's got a lot of resources that maybe you want to share.
I was going to mention this. Look, the ancient alien theory, whatever, you have the multiverse theory. This is an atheist response, right? You have the hypothesis that the universe is one of many that support life. This is actually a legitimate response.
Sure.
Where is the scientific, mathematical, historical evidence to back that? Relative to what we see in antiquity, relative to what we see in the persons and message of Jesus Christ. Listen to this language, right? So this is John chapter 1, verse 1. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was with God in the beginning. Through him all things are made. Without him nothing was made that has been made. In him was life, and that life was the light of all mankind. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. The light, the Word. Like, we're talking about the Word. This isn't fluffy language. The Word, the essence of God, the person of God, the relationship that God has with us. It's through his Word. This is his Word as well. You have the Logos, you have the Rhema, you have this connection. We all have this hole in our heart that's longing for truth and longing to know that we are made. And the beauty about the biblical account is it's not talking about a God that's disconnected from us, that just kind of creates willy-nilly and doesn't have to explain himself. We're talking about order. We're talking about an intention. And here's the cool thing is, if God just created the world and backed out, which many religions believe, around the world. But
Hey,
to
real quick,
me, that is not an accurate portrait of a God.
Hey, Otangelo is from Brazil, so he can't call
Okay.
in due to restrictions. However, Otangelo, if you want to email
Why
me,
can't he call into restrictions?
not restrictions. I'm just saying it's long distance.
Oh,
I
it's long
guess,
distance.
right?
Okay.
I guess. I
Internet,
mean, I think that's how that
internet
works.
man. You should be able to
Yeah.
call. It's free, right?
Yeah, if you got to call in, internet type
Hopefully the
thing.
governments aren't locking down that convo. I think
You never know.
I think Islam's
First-
going over in that part of the world.
First, he says that he thinks a call-in show about Christians is great. Well, thanks. I appreciate that.
This is available to everybody.
Yeah,
This
but
is
anyway,
available to atheists.
I was going to say, Otangelo, if you want to email me now, Nick at miraclesandatheists.com. I will email back with a link if you want to get on here for the last. We're only going to be on for another like 7-8 minutes.
Yeah, another couple minutes here.
Quick. So I will get
look. This was a tough one. I mean, you mentioned Neanderthals, right?
You're the one to do it, man.
No, I mean, this is a tough one. So like, I mean, look here, Neanderthals, they use 23andMe, DNA testing, all this stuff. I mean, I think the issue. Okay, if we're talking, let's go back. We mentioned teleological arguments, cosmological arguments, the first cause, that you can't create something from nothing. I mean, these are basic. A child can understand these things, right? But from a scientific perspective, you can show me in a lab. I've had students to talk to about this. They're like, well, we can create these young life conditions in a laboratory. But can you create a complex human being with DNA structures and the ability of a higher consciousness to understand its creation relative to a planet that sits on a 1 degree tilt, a ball and iron, perfectly set from the sun? Any closer, any further away, we either explode into a ball of fire or we completely freeze over, and all the different gravitational pulls and everything in there. Like, I'm just getting started. You cannot sit here and tell me you can create that in a laboratory. And it's going to take you billions of years to figure it out. Get real. Like, we need to grow up. We need to accept the responsibility. There is morality, that morality had to come from somewhere, and we are accountable to the God or the creative force, whatever you want to call it. And the best evidence we have of this is a man that came 2,000 years ago that was able to master the elements, that prophetically can make things happen. And at the same time, and look at the portrait of the man. Look at Jesus Christ. Is this a guy that just said, I want everyone to bow down to me and worship me? I mean, he might use certain language like, I'm the only way to the Father, but look at how he lived, forgiving enemies, like being his own people abandoning him and him loving him. The portrait we have of mercy and grace in our Creator God is a God worthy of worship and consistent and reliable. And here's the cool thing. He's promised us that he's going to return. So look at the grace he's shown us over thousands of years. Yeah. So it's not like we could say, well, God doesn't have to honor his word. No, he honors his word and he gives us an opportunity to get to know him. To me, in a relational standpoint, you can't even use that criteria on your own wives or your own significant others or your own children. So you're going to hold God to a criteria you won't even hold to yourself or the people in your life. Well, I don't have to believe that the people in my life exist and that they mean anything. Dude, you won't stay married long with that attitude. And it's sad. It's sad that we have to have this conversation because we're talking about things that are the most important and consequential in the world. And there's an eternal consequence to these decisions as well. And I think that maybe hopefully will lead into the last part of this. And look, if I speak this way, I'm not going to apologize for it, but I'm trying to get better. I want to be more inviting. I actually want people to engage on this show, and Nick and I will probably talk afterwards. Like, hey man, you went too heavy here, but I'm just saying, it's
we got to do a debrief. I'm sure
it's because we're in this culture where the types of things happening.
Well, he says he just emailed me, and I'm looking at my email.
I'm not sure.
And I don't see the email, buddy. I'm sorry. I can do a search. Maybe it got my spam or something.
But here's the thing. The reason why I think this is an important conversation is because these same attitudes, not even a century ago, were floating on college campuses, were talked about in the popular culture. And this is the same worldview that has led to the wholesale slaughter of hundreds of millions of people in the last century. Look at the root of, go ahead.
I got the email from Otangelo. I'm going to email him back right now.
Okay. Anyway,
we'll come on here and finish this off for the next couple of minutes. Sorry we didn't give you more time. We should have thought of this earlier. But yeah, we'll have it up there next time. We're learning, man. This is new, so
I know. I think we lost some people too, but
Yeah.
anyway.
it's all good. We'll have them come
Yeah.
on and talk about this a little bit. Yeah. So, man, it's been really interesting. As far as obviously, it'd be good to have more people calling, because I want to get more, education and experience talking to people about this topic. This is like the linchpin. Linchpin, Rodney Franklin. Cool. Hey, thanks for joining, Rodney, rather. So we'll see if Otangelo from Brazil comes on and talk to us about creationism. Here he is. Hey, what's going on? Can you hear me?
Yes, hello guys. Can you hear me?
Yes.
sir.
From all over Brazil. Look at that.
Yeah.
Yeah, good to have you on. Thanks for joining.
Yeah, I actually live in Brazil, but I am Swiss Italian. So.
Oh, is that right? Okay. Okay. Good deal. Good deal.
Yeah. So I mean, it's I thought about what you guys are doing, and I think it's great because there are so many atheist calling shows, and I mean, it's
That's where we got the idea.
Yeah. I think it's frustrating because, I mean, it is very clear. I've never seen any host of these call-in shows to actually really being open to permit the evidence to lead wherever it is. And then eventually to be actually convinced or to change worldview. And what I see is that they basically, what they are trying to do is to draw believers to their worldview.
Yes.
And that's it.
Yes.
It's not about something which goes both ways. If they would have stronger evidence that naturalism is true, that we would move to their side. But if we have better evidence that theism is true, that they would actually move to our side. We never see that happening. So, and they accuse, I mean, I've called in at many, I mean, if you put my name on YouTube, you'll see many videos where I called in at the Atheist Experience, Talk, Heathens, The Line, and so forth. And on many shows I'm blocked. I cannot call in anymore.
Are you serious? Oh, wow. They blocked?
Oh, I see this right here. Jack Ingtrich goes off on Untangelo, and oh man, dude, you're all over the place here, dude. You got 54,000 views. You got your own show up in here, man. Look at this.
Well,
I have two. I have two YouTube channels.
That's
One
crazy,
is the God
dude.
Talk, and
give you a shout out.
Yeah, man, let's have you come back on or something. Very cool.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, sure. I mean, you guys are closing the stream, so I don't want to take your time, but I guess
maybe
you
give us like a little taste though of what you think the strongest argument is. I guess should I make the assumption that you're a theist then?
Yes, I'm a Christian.
Christian, okay, perfect. Yeah, I wasn't sure. That's what I gathered. But so when you have the discussion about evolution with atheists, where do you start?
Well, you know, when they focus on evolution, then what I say is this, that explaining biodiversity is just a small part of all the explaining that we have to do in regards of origins. And I mean, the explaining starts with the origin of the universe, with the laws of physics, with the fine-tuning, with the origin of life, then biodiversity, if common ancestry is true, origin of consciousness, of the mind, morality. And so there are many different topics, and they always try to focus on evolution. And once you remove evolution from the discussion, and you go to all things which are required even to get to evolution, then you have a true dichotomy. Either God was involved or not. And once you remove God from the picture, what is left?
What I've seen is even the most preeminent atheist skeptics, the ones that actually, like Richard Dawkins or I don't know, Sam Harris is starting to lean in certain conversations to the possibility of Christ being a real person, because they can't deny it. But I think what you're gonna see more often, and I think this is actually I don't want to get into the realm of what may or may not happen in the future, but I think what you're going to see them leaning more on the alien theory or some kind of intelligent designer. Yeah, because that's going to substantiate, and this is going in the realm of bibliology, but that in potentially apocalyptic literature. But I believe that will substantiate
That's
8 years.
also ultimately if the end
Yeah.
times come, right? That's
That's going to
the biggest.
substantiate an antichrist entrance with signs and miracles and wonders and things like
We're
that.
all
So I
taken
think
up by aliens. Yeah.
that's why I think that is part of the Great Deception, or one of the parts of the Great Deception. But that's a whole other conversation.
Well, look at this though. Seriously, I just
Yeah.
want to put this out there. Look at Endgame, Avengers Endgame.
Mhm.
Otangelo, have you seen Avengers Endgame and the parallels to the end times in all that situation?
I think I've seen the first movie. Is that the kind of games where Jews are like running for their life, something like that? I
No, it
think
was
it's a...
the superhero movie, The Avengers. They're with
no, I've
Thanos
not seen it.
and
Yeah,
okay,
yeah,
yeah.
I've
There's
not
the
seen it.
Marvel thing, yeah. So there's a whole scene where basically they're in my opinion they're positioning people to get ready for an alien attack. That's really with the 50% of the population was taken out. For me, that signifies the rapture, and then the attackers, the bad guys, are the alien lives from another planet. They just show up through different portals and things like that. So there's a lot of I can get into probably.
Yeah, just getting back to the conversation of the evidence. If the strongest argument, a naturalist, atheist, skeptic, whatever, if you were to take out evolutionary theory, what is the strongest argument you have against a creator, against an intentional design of our creation? Because that's what we see in evidence. That's what we see in the biology, the cells, the DNA structures, complex organisms. They didn't just evolve through random mutations. You don't see that anywhere. And if we have the ability to discern that and to measure those things, it's not a matter of it's going to take a couple more million years or billion years to figure it out, because the same fundamental problem of human beings is going to be there. There's a sin nature. There's a recognition that there's something that is connecting us to an existential force that we cannot see, but we know that's personal. And why it's personal? Because we're created in its image. What man is more likely to do is to create its own form of God, if not making themselves God. Man, the word says that man will profess themselves to be wise and exchange the knowledge of truth for a lie, right? But
Right.
if the best attempt man's going to have is to, and because we can't work together because of sin, because of wars, because of everything else, we're going to try to basically create an intelligent life, and we're going to offload our responsibility to that intelligent life. And here's the problem with that. This is going to poke a hole right through that concept. If you create a non-material living organism, or if you create a computer and you call it life, the issue you're going to run into is that you cannot, that thing, even if it were to transcend its own limitations, it's going to recognize it was created. And that's an issue because, one, when it recognizes created, it's going to recognize its creators were flawed. We don't see those flaws in God. Now, people will look at God and make moral-based judgments about what God does, but they're not fully aware or capable of understanding the fullness of who God is, because we look at the person of Jesus Christ and we don't see that. And that's why I believe that's the strongest argument. I think that people put their faith in Jesus, because the way he was demonstrated, the way that he had lived out his life, was so radical and yet so perfect that human beings couldn't possibly do it any other way. And if it's one thing to live, if you live morally, that's one thing. But he was demonstrated by powers and miracles. He demonstrated prophetically speaking, because the Pharisees, I think some of the Pharisees understood if this was truly the Messiah, he's going to violate the law in some way, shape, or form. And he never did.
Otangelo, I appreciate your boldness, calling these different atheist shows and, sharing your worldview and just trying to have an open dialogue. It's interesting. Sometimes I hear the Christians call into those shows, and the concessions are usually pretty quick. I don't know if it's an intimidation thing or what, but keep on doing that. And they're blocking you, I guess you're doing the right, bringing the right arguments and a strong position. So I appreciate that.
It's cool. Yeah, I see him calling in, man. He's got some views on some of these, dude.
Otangelo, any closing words before we close out with this?
Well, I think you have a great initiative. I can only encourage you, don't be dismotivated by the numbers. I mean, I guess you just started now. Sure. And I would really like to see a Christian show where atheists call in and make their case, and theists actually responding to them. So kudos to the initiative, and I hope that it takes off.
Excellent.
Thanks, man.
I really appreciate
the encouragement.
Thanks so much. We'll be in touch.
So
for sure.
I see
Okay.
that same level of support, encouragement on the other side, and it's incredible how we seem we're more fractured. It seems in our camp because everyone wants to get the right theology and the right history, and it's like that's the one disadvantage I think we have over the atheist is that they're more organized. It seems.
Yeah, Christians. Gosh, it's there's so many good apologists out there.
Yeah.
That, have really good arguments and things like that. But it seems like, and I'll just say this, it's kind of like what Otangelo was talking about with the atheist call-in shows. That a lot of this is an echo chamber type of thing, where they're kind of validating their own worldviews.
Yeah.
I would think that I'd probably say that's probably one of the reasons. It's a support structure. And I hear this a lot. I don't think atheists would deny this. They get together because they feel persecuted by Christians and theists for being atheists. So they get together and they sort of validate, their own views and come together with different thoughts and things like that. So I get why they congregate and they have these things. And while it's comforting to be in your own echo chamber, but I mean, the message that Marcus and I, at least on the regular podcast, and you would not disagree, Jason, is that like we want to have uncomfortable conversations to learn and grow, one in our own faith, in our own worldview, so that we can be better equipped to communicate with the world. If we just stick around in our own echo chambers and we just reiterate the same things over again, it's so the conservatives is a good example. Like you can get some of these conservative groups and these like QAnon and Trumpers and all these conspiracies, and like there's some really good detailed information in some of these groups. But then you kind of feel like, wow, I have no idea what the left is saying about, Omicron or about.
Well, we're all. The thing is, if we can acknowledge that we're all created in the image of God, we're going to find that there are brothers and sisters there that have the same heart level issues that we have.
Right,
And
but you've got to have the conversations. You've got to have the conversations. You've got to follow. So I guess my biggest takeaway as I close this thing out is you've got to follow people that don't think like you. I think I follow Joe Biden on Twitter. Not that I really read his stuff too often, but I mean, I follow people that I have wildly different worldviews from. I follow Eric D. Murphy from Skeptic Generation. Like, I think what he's trying to do is have these conversations, and we're trying to do the same thing. But I really do think that if we don't include people that don't think like us, then we're not going to be of value to the world, especially as Christians, man.
Well,
I mean,
that's a good point. I think this is one of the things I'll probably even just tack onto that. Like, when I served in the military, I served with people of all different religions and walks and backgrounds. But when you have to shower and live and work and bleed with the people next to you, your faith, your character, or I'd say your faith and how that informs your life and your character is much more winsome than the words that you say. And so I think that you're right. All these platforms create echo chambers, but you actually have a live event. I'm going to drop a plug for this, but I think the Saturday, and that actually is a tangible way that not only both camps can come to the table, but public can judge for themselves and be invited. And dude, like that is the solution to that problem. It's one solution to that problem. Going on college campuses and having the conversation direct with students instead of going out there preaching fire and brimstone is a solution.
Yeah. You have the conversation. So yeah, thanks for the plug though. We are going to, this coming Saturday, January 8th, we're going to be setting up at the Raleigh market. If you're local and you're watching this and you're in Raleigh, then come on out to the Raleigh markets, the fairgrounds. And if you're not local, you can watch it because we're going to stream. We're going to stream publicly. So we'll have a tent, a booth. It's going to be super cold. So we'll have heat lamps and we're giving out coffee and things like that. So it'll be fun. And we're going to have an atheist, young atheist apologist, I guess if you want to call him that person. He's going to be on there, and we're going to have another person, Marlon, who's going to be representing the Christian worldview, and is not like this, different than this. With Miracles Atheists, we really get into storytelling, and we get into your personal experiences and just asking real open dialogues. It's going to be really interesting. But this particular episode, we're going to be talking about demons and deliverance. So yeah. It's going to be fascinating. Marlon has claimed to cast out several demons in the past and his experience. So I love talking about this kind of stuff. I love unpacking this tension with different worldviews and supernatural. So anyway, that's going to be on Saturday. It'll be right here on this YouTube channel, right here on this Facebook, same platform, different crowd. And Jason's going to be there helping to set up. So I appreciate that too, man.
Yeah, man. Can I close with a couple scriptures and then think that'll be it? All right, cool. So going old school, this is the Shema. It's in Deuteronomy 10, 12 through 21. And now, Israel, what does the Lord your God ask for you but to fear the Lord your God, to walk in obedience to him, to love him, to serve the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul, and to observe the Lord's commands and decrees that I'm giving you today for your own good? To the Lord your God belongs the heavens, even the highest heavens, the earth and everything in it. Yet the Lord set his affection on your ancestors and loved them, and he chose you, their descendants, above all the nations as it is today. And I'm actually going to shoot over to Romans chapter 10, 9 through 13. If you declare with your mouth Jesus is Lord and believe in your heart that God raised him from the dead, you will be saved. For it is with your heart that you believe and are justified, and it is with your mouth that you profess your faith and are saved. As scripture says, anyone who believes in him will never be put to shame. For there is no difference between Jew and Gentile. The same Lord is Lord of all and richly blesses all who call on him. For everyone who calls on the name of the Lord will be saved. It's that simple. It's simple, but it's not easy.
Right.
It's a narrow path. And the beauty is that you get not only the confidence of who God is in your heart, but the relationship of knowing him. And this is not just for this side of heaven. This is not the only death we're going to experience. There is a life beyond this, and there's also a death beyond this, and that's a choice. And thank God we have a God that gives us an opportunity to make the decision now. While we can use our creative faculties, while we can observe his nature and his character by what is clearly seen, not by some invisible process that nobody understands quite clearly. He didn't want that to be a mystery. That's why he told us plainly, I gave you breath. I created everything in this, and I gave you a tangible display of that in my son, Jesus Christ. And that is the good news. The great news is that we actually can enter into that relationship with him for eternity. So Nick, I don't know about you, but I'm looking forward to that day.
That's right.
And for those that aren't on that journey, we just encourage you, look at the evidence, but more so look at what it says about the God that evidence points to. Look at the evidence, the historical reliability of the Gospels, of the person of Jesus. And what does Jesus do? Jesus points back to the Father. So there's this constant direction of pointing back to the Creator. And our Creator is not a creator that creates and then books. He's not somebody that just exists in everything. He creates everything out of his glory, out of his love. But he actually wants to have that personal relationship like a father does to a son. And so that is something that we want to encourage you throughout this time. Maybe you're on that journey and you want to walk in that. If you want to talk more, you can reach out to the website at portcampus.org. I'll be happy to follow up with you. And just thank you for your time. And
thanks.
Hope you guys have a great week and see you next time.
Yeah, we'll see you next time. And we're going to be streaming again on Saturday, so check us out then. And until then, all right, be blessed. Bye.